Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Away the Taboo. Tonight is going to be a really special episode that I actually am not going to be a part of. This is going to be a conversation with the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby surrogacy consultant, Aliza Konig, and Carly Joseph, who has an absolutely really incredible, heartbreaking, but incredible story. Hopefully this works. You know, technology is fun sometimes. And what I want to say before I turn everything over and bring everybody in. Oh, here's one and here's two. Look at
We did
that. It
it.
actually, look at that. Okay, so before I actually hand over the reins officially to Aliza, what I want to say is just Carly, it's such an honor to meet you here. And I'm sorry that I'm not going to be fully present, although sort of off camera present for this conversation.
No
I'm so
worries.
touched. So touched that you agreed to share your story with us. And for all of you out there, I'm Amy Barron. I am the founder and executive director of I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, and our incredible surrogacy consultant, Aliza Konig, is going to be taking the reins and having this wonderful conversation with Carly. And so I'm in awe. I can't wait to listen afterwards and just anyone, please drop all your comments, questions, thoughts in the chat. And I'm handing it off.
Thanks so much, Jamie. See you later. First of all, Carly, look at the crowd that you've brought in. Everybody's like loving you. It's amazing. It's very, I just so you know, everybody, this is Carly's first Insta Live. So I'm very
Yes.
honored that she's doing this with me. And it's hard, I know, to like see all the comments, but also be focused on here.
I
So
know.
hopefully you
I'm
guys
just
can,
like, I'll let you
yeah,
handle the comments for now. Don't want
I'll
to
try
mess
my
anything
best.
up.
Totally. But everybody can give lots of hearts. I love seeing the floating hearts
Oh,
that come on. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Amy said, my name is Aliza Konig. I am the surrogacy consultant for I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. If you didn't listen in last night, I was on sharing a bit more about general surrogacy questions that come up and challenges. I shared a little bit about my own journey. I've certainly shared it in the past. So if anybody's curious to hear more about my story, you're welcome to look back in our archives and learn more. But I'm really excited tonight to be introducing all of you out there to Carly Joseph. So I'm actually, I introduce a lot of speakers, but I would love if Carly, if you would give like a quick bio of who you are pre-surrogacy, and then we'll jump into everything
yeah.
else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Pre-surrogacy, I was just a normal person who was trying to get pregnant. I started trying to get pregnant a couple of months after my wedding, which was in 2019, and it was not happening. It was also COVID. And so I think anyone who's trying to have a baby and it's not happening kind of knows that feeling of like obsession that kind of sets in. And so we decided to pursue IVF after doing some testing with our doctors. And every round of IVF, there were 8 in total, sort of just gave us a little bit less of the answer that we wanted and sort of more question marks. And there was an endometriosis diagnosis. I mean, I'm glossing over a lot of details, but you know, it was sort of like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back for many years. And then we finally decided to explore surrogacy.
And how did you even get to that point? Was that just something that you figured out on your own? Did a doctor recommend it? How did you get to that
So
conclusion?
basically, we had been making embryos, but really only like 1 per round. And then I had a couple of failed transfers. And every time we had a failed transfer, it was just like, oh my gosh, it took so long and so much sort of investment to make this embryo. It felt like we were just wasting them. And like, we kind of got to the point where we had been able to make good embryos. So we were like, okay, well, at least we have like that part taken care of. And we never actually got a definitive answer on whether or not I would be able to carry. I had had endometriosis surgery. So it wasn't actually like a very clear path. Our doctor was sort of like, you've had 8 retrievals and 4 failed transfers, so maybe it's time to start thinking about someone else carrying the baby. And it was not okay, like, great, let's do it. It was a huge decision. Financially, it was a huge decision. There was a lot of grief and sort of like acceptance and surrender that had to happen around like me not carrying. And that was really difficult. So it definitely took, honestly, until the baby was born, many, many months of realizing this was our new reality and being so grateful that we had that option and feeling so privileged to be able to have that, and also at the same time, grieving me being pregnant.
Totally. I actually I shared last night, and then Amy did a cool thing, and she like turned it into I don't know what a post, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But just the other night, I was just like sitting with my husband, and all of a sudden I just like started crying, and I was like, I'm never gonna be pregnant. Like I just had this reality, and I already have two children. Like I'm done with my surrogacy, and you just like it's so hard to explain to somebody, like just that like you said, that mourning of that loss of never being able to carry your child or pregnant. It's something so indescribable unless you've actually really experienced it, and it's a lot of pain, and I guess it really kind of never goes away even when you're done with your family building and stuff like that. But so you're dealing with the emotions of everything you're going through. What was the first steps you took to starting your surrogacy journey?
The very first step we took, and which is what I recommend to everyone who kind of I cross paths with, is we spoke to an attorney. Um, he was amazing. He's the attorney we ended up working with. And he gave me, I think, the very best advice that anyone's given me in this entire sort of industry and space, which was that surrogacy entails a ton of paperwork and contracts and agreements, and the legalities of it are sort of like endless. But there's not really any enforcement of it. You can put anything you want on a piece of paper and spend all the money in the world saying, you have to have this test, or you have to eat organic, or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's another human being on this planet with your baby inside of them. And like, you have trust, and that's about all you have. And he sort of said, find someone you feel like you can really trust and who you feel like you really vibe with, basically. And it was like kind of mind blowing because it's like the simplest sort of thing. But it was really like the best guidance that we could have gotten. And we were very blessed to have matched with two amazing women who we trusted so much, still trust so much. And, of course, there's like complications along the way, and everybody sort of has their own interests and things that are important to them in the journey. And that can be very different for intended parents and for surrogates. And navigating that together is really hard. But having that trust and understanding that like you're both in it for the same reason and towards the same goal, was sort of like everything. Um, so that was our first conversation. And then we worked with a concierge service to match with our surrogates, and then kind of followed the process with an agency.
Can you maybe explain for our listeners out there what it means, a concierge service for surrogacy?
Yeah, so this is the type of service that I have started doing fairly recently. Essentially, the sort of standard practice of surrogacy is people go out to an agency. Some people interview several agencies, or identify an agency through the recommendation of their doctor, and choose to work with them. And since COVID, I mean, things have changed quite a bit, and I did my surrogacy journeys post-COVID, so I can't speak to how it was before. But wait lists with most sort of reputable agencies can be anywhere from 12 to 18 months. And most people who are working with a surrogate to build their family, especially after coming through like a lot of infertility and a lot of grief, don't want to wait another 12 to 18 months when they're already feeling behind. So essentially, what I do is I go out to many agencies to sort of expand the pool of available surrogates that somebody could match with. And I cut down on that match time quite a bit, and also act as an advocate and an educator and sort of a support system throughout the entire journey.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you mentioned that it's a wait time of 12 to 18 months. And I'm curious if like your spidey senses go off. I actually just got an email today from an agency that's based in Michigan. And for those who aren't familiar, Michigan just changed their laws to allow for surrogacy. It was illegal to pay a surrogate in the state of Michigan. Parents who tried to figure out ways to do it had the hardest time literally adopting their own children, and it was incredibly discouraged or very much discouraged to do it in the state of Michigan. So it became legal now. So I got this email from an agency today. I don't even know how I got on their list, to be perfectly honest, because it actually said, and we'll follow up with you soon via text to see if you're still interested. And I was like, did I sign up for something? But anyways, they said that because it's new in Michigan, they have so many women waiting that their wait time is 3 months. And for me, when like I see that an agency suddenly has like a very short wait time, or they say we have all these surrogates available, to me that's like there's something wrong with those surrogates, and that's why they're not being like scooped up. I'm curious what your thoughts are when somebody says, "Oh, we have all these surrogates ready and waiting."
It's a really good question. I mean, I think with Michigan in particular, like that doesn't concern me because it is a
Right.
very exciting development. I'm actually going to an event in Michigan next week to sort of celebrate kind of the legality of surrogacy in the state of Michigan. And it's a big deal, especially for people on the East Coast, because there's now another state with a whole new pool of surrogate candidates that are available to them. I mean, the reality is that every agency sort of has a different program and a different process, and some agencies maintain a very long list of intended parents, and others do not. And, you know, I think part of my services and my practice is like identifying not only the best surrogate for an intended parent, but also the best agency and pairing them with that right agency that's a perfect fit for them. And that means sort of considering all the different aspects of that program.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of Michigan, and
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense how you handle it. So that's great, and enjoy next week.
Thank you.
We actually in the support group that I run, which now you're a member of,
Yes.
we have somebody who is from Michigan who she had her baby outside of Michigan, a few months ago, but she's been very involved in helping move the legislation.
It's
So it's really exciting.
amazing.
Yeah. Um, so you guys, you went with an agency route. You didn't do an independent journey. You used agencies for both of your children.
Yes, we worked with two different agencies, two different surrogates at two different agencies for both of our journeys. Yeah.
Got it. And I guess you had the advice from that lawyer, but what qualities were you specifically looking for in a surrogate or in your surrogates when you were finding them?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, mostly we were really just looking for someone who was doing this, for kind of the quote unquote right reasons, who was coming from a place of really wanting to be helpful. We really wanted to hear their story about like their why of like, doing this. Like, yes, I understand like many women feel like they loved being pregnant and it's not a big deal, but like we really wanted somebody who had some connection to this beyond that, whether it's like, Tori, our first surrogate who delivered my son, I remember her saying to me that she kind of realized one day that for her, like getting pregnant wasn't a big deal. And she would, be on Instagram or, see people posting their stories about how difficult it was to get pregnant and how just like they couldn't achieve this one thing that they wanted. And it moved her to tears. And she was sort of like, I could easily help somebody with this. So why wouldn't I? And she's just, was such an amazing person. And I was like, okay, you get the emotional part of this. And I think that's what most of my clients are looking for. I think that's what most people are kind of looking for to connect with. And we wanted someone who was open to, having a relationship with us and having us be involved. We really didn't want this to be like 100% transactional, but at the same time, we had never done it before. So, we couldn't really say what we wanted that relationship to look like exactly. And I don't know, I kind of like always make this analogy, but it's a little bit like dating in that you can't really describe like, oh, okay, like I want a person who has like this qualities and X, Y, and Z, but it's more just the connection that you feel and that vibe and like, okay, I think we can like do this group project together. And that's kind of how it worked.
I love that you just called it a group project. That's such a great way of
It's a big group
saying it.
project.
Yeah, it's funny because like you think about, I don't know what kind of a student you were, but I like think about myself. It was like I was like the take charge student in the group where I was like, okay, this is your job, this is your job. And I think that was kind of how I was in our family planning group project
Yes.
with surrogacy as well.
I was much more like that in our family planning than I was probably in school. But
It's okay. But that's great. So you mentioned did you have, would you say like nice relationships with both of your surrogates? Were you surprised how they kind of panned out What was that like?
We had and we have amazing relationships with both of them. They may even be watching this right now. So yeah, they were, each journey was so different and came with its own sort of complicating factors and issues along the way, and tackling those things together. My surrogate Tori, who delivered my son, had 2 miscarriages initially, which is sort of why we ended up bringing on another surrogate later. So navigating that together and having space to care for each other, and, how the hardship of like us having another loss and grieving that, and her dealing with the physicalities of a miscarriage and feeling like, she like kind of let us down, even though it wasn't her letting us down because it wasn't her fault, was really sort of like emotionally complicated. And, obviously going through that together brings you closer, and kind of like living through a pregnancy together and then the birth, obviously. And we're still really close. We text all the time. We sent photos. Crystal, who delivered my daughter, has come to visit us and see the babies. And, we have such different and special relationships with both of them.
That's nice. And I just want to put out there that unfortunately not everybody has that experience though.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I think you kind of hope for the best and you have to sort of plan for the worst.
Yes.
And also I think that, you mentioned something really important. Like a lot of people think like, oh, you had all your struggles or your losses, you're just going to have a surrogate and you're going to get your baby. Like this is not a 9-month process. This can be 2 years or longer even for some people. With both of our kids, it was about 2 years from start to finish until they were born. Both of our surrogates had miscarriages the first time, and you're just like, how much more devastation can one person have? It's just
100%.
so unfair. Yeah.
And I definitely did feel that way at the beginning, much like I felt in the beginning of IVF. I was like, okay, we're not getting pregnant. We're going to do IVF. Like I remember one conversation my husband and I had with my in-laws. We were living with them during COVID, and we were like, okay, yeah, we're going to do a round of IVF, but like we should be pregnant by Christmas time. And then like we were making plans, and it was just like such an assumed thing. And then similarly, like years later, when we went on to work with a surrogate, I was kind of like, okay, well, now that we have a surrogate, like she's going to get pregnant and then we'll have our baby. And that's obviously not at all how it went, but we do have our babies now.
Yeah, totally. Can you talk a little bit about your communication with your surrogates when they were expecting and how often you spoke and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So with both of them, we texted a lot. I would say that was like our primary method of communication. We did go to some appointments. I will say that we went to fewer than I think we both had anticipated we would, for a variety of reasons. I think the biggest one being that once we were kind of in the pregnancy journey, we kind of realized how underwhelming most of these appointments are. It's kind of like, okay, pee in a cup, we're going to make sure the baby's alive, and then you move on. A lot of OBs are not like super friendly to intended parents, and there's a lot of like liability restrictions in terms of recording or being on FaceTime or even being in the room. So it kind of just ended up being easier to just go to the big ones. We went for the anatomy scan and things like that. But we would always sort of text like before the appointments, after the appointments, do FaceTimes where we could. But there was very sort of casual, easy, fluid communication. And I know that that is not the case with everyone with their surrogate, but that's something that like I encourage clients to talk about on a match call in terms of like, what are you comfortable with? What is your style of communication? Try to get a sense of the surrogate's style of communication to see if it's going to be a good fit. And with Crystal, my daughter was born at 34 weeks, and our surrogate was PPROM. So she was in the hospital at 29 weeks. Basically, her water broke early. So she lived in the hospital for 5 weeks, and our communication obviously changed quite a bit at that point. We visited her at least once a week, I think. We would make sure she had things that she needed, like comfort food. We tried to bring a TV into the hospital so she could watch Netflix, and we got in trouble for that, so don't recommend. We were there for both births, and we've communicated a ton afterwards.
Great. Well, I feel like I'm jumping ahead,
No,
but
no,
only
go
because
ahead.
you mentioned you have babies and
Yes.
you're talking about your son and your daughter. Can you give everybody a little insight into when you're saying babies, what you mean by babies?
So I have a 7-month-old and a 3-month-old. It's very hard. We are very happy and also it's very challenging.
Yeah.
I will say, I think, and I did not expect this, but like having gone through a long fertility journey and going through the surrogacy process, I felt like I had forever and a day to prepare for having kids. And I don't mean just the like regular preparations, like getting all the gear and polling a million moms to see what best stroller you should buy. Like I did all of that. Obviously, I'm like very type A and very organized, but just mentally, like I was like, okay, like I've been wanting this forever and it's going to be great. And it has rocked us. It is very hard. It is amazing, but it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Harder than trying to have them.
Yeah, I'm sure. When so maybe we'll go with this train for a little bit and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
jump
yeah.
to some other questions. But so how come your kids ended up so close in age? Like what you mentioned, your first surrogate had two miscarriages. So at what point did you start working on finding another surrogate?
So basically, there were two miscarriages a couple of months apart. And basically, like the days after the second miscarriage were just sort of us trying to pick up the pieces and figure out where we go from here. And I vividly remember the moment, like my husband and I were sitting in his office and kind of talking through, well, like, should we let that agency rematch us or should we start over? We didn't even know at that point if Tori was going to be willing to do a third transfer with us, which thankfully she was, and that's my son. So we were kind of just going through the different sort of scenarios. And I just kind of looked up and was like, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I think we should just go ahead with the third transfer and also look for a new surrogate and kind of see what happens. And I thought he was going to be like, no, that's insane. He was just like, okay. And that's what we did. And it worked on the third time. So Tori was about 5 months pregnant when we were getting ready to do a transfer to Crystal. And, at that point we were kind of like, should we, shouldn't we? But having had two miscarriages and all the loss that we went through, I don't think we ever really felt like there was going to be a point where we felt safe in that pregnancy. It always sort of felt like we were holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Thankfully, knock on wood, like, everything went fine. So we just went ahead anyway. And they were meant to be just over 5 months apart. And then they ended up just being 17 weeks apart since she was born early.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's probably it's just like harder than twins because it's just an extended newborn state of
Very
insanity.
extended. Yeah. It's very extended. Yeah. I think that once they're probably like a year old, I'm hoping they will like function more like twins and be, more on the same page developmentally. But right now, like, I mean, there's just a huge difference between a true 3-month-old and a 7-month-old, but we're really more like a 2-month-old and a 7-month-old. So
Totally. Will they be in the same grade potentially?
so funny. Everybody asks that. I don't know. I don't know anything about schools yet because I'm not dealing with that yet.
Got it.
Potentially.
I live in New York, and it's like like I guess maybe I didn't know before I had kids, but like cutoffs are like a big thing.
Right.
Like everyone's like I have three. My son is sandwiched between two nephews who they're all the same age.
Oh my gosh.
And they end up though being all within the same year, like they would be in the same class if
Okay.
lived in the same state. So we joke that their bar mitzvah year is going to be really busy because like
Yes.
one lives in California, one's in Florida, we're in New York,
Well,
but
we've already committed to one joint bar mitzvah. I mean, that's
good for you.
yeah. That's
You spent
happening.
enough on bringing them
Yeah.
into this world, like you got to
We will
cut
have
off.
that savings. Yes.
Totally. That's great. So what were your conversations even like? What did you tell Tori when you're like, and we're expecting again? Like, did you have that? Did you tell her? Or I mean, I'm sure you told her, but
Yeah, we told her well before the transfer. I don't remember actually how we like broached that. I mean, we just kept it very real. We were like, you know, as well as we do that, this might not work. And we actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we made a point of telling her before we did the third transfer with her because we wanted her to be fully on board. That was really important to us. We've always like been very honest and transparent. And same thing with Crystal. When we met her, we told her our situation and what had happened to date and that we were planning to go ahead again. And she was like, as long as you still go ahead with me, that's fine. And yeah, we were just kind of like, we want this to work, and also we want to have more than one kid, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So let's go back to the agency conversation for just a
Yeah.
second, because similarly, we also worked with two different agencies for our two kids. We even had a third in the middle where we lost $25,000. But we'll talk about that another time. But and you don't have to go into details about why you chose different agencies, but it's not uncommon for someone to say, you know what, we need to work with a different agency the next time around. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that experience and that decision?
Yeah. I mean, our agencies were very different, but both incredible. Our first agency was, you know, a bit smaller on the surrogacy side, and a bit newer to surrogacy. And that was appealing to us just because we knew from like a case management perspective, they were not going to be totally overloaded. They were super attentive to everything. I also knew from talking to Tori on the match call that like she felt really connected with them. So it just felt like a really good fit. And then, you know, kind of similar with the second agency, you know, just like there was a good sort of vibe. Like we had a good connection. We spoke with the owner of the agency before we moved ahead, and she was such a sweetheart. And I'm still close with her now, and we talk all the time. And yeah, you know, I think they were both great. I think there are many agencies that are great, and you know, the details of their programs all kind of vary a bit, whether it's their fees, the structure of their fees, you know, how many case managers they have, how many cases they do in a year. And those are all kind of general good things to ask about when thinking about working with an agency and what might work for you. Do you want an agency that's a bit more corporate in feel, that's going to be really, really big? Do you care if you have one case manager the entire time? Things like that.
That's really helpful for people to know. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and let's talk about then, I guess you did have loss, so I would imagine, you know, you were nervous at different points throughout the pregnancy, or maybe really until the baby's in your hands, you're nervous.
Yes.
You know, so can you talk about how you dealt with those emotions and the fears and just connecting to a pregnancy when you're so worried, is it even going to come true?
Yeah, I don't think I have very good advice on this. I felt incredibly anxious the entire time, to the point where I think at a certain stage I was numb. Like I had been so anxious for myself for such a long time, going through an egg retrieval, like waiting for that phone call about the test results, you know, waiting to hear about the transfer, so many failed pregnancy tests, like sort of all of that, I think just weighed on me. And then after a point, I kind of like stopped feeling so much about it. And that was kind of how I coped and got through. And I don't recommend that. But that was honestly just how I sort of got through it. And I noticed it in myself, like sitting in the, you know, room with Tori and Crystal at their transfers. It was like, you know, I would get texts from like friends or my family being like, good luck today. Like, we're so excited for you. And like, even from them, they were excited. And it was like very hard for me to feel excited and also very hard for me to feel nervous. I kind of just stopped feeling at a certain point. Um, and I think all that feeling kind of came back when my son was born, and like he kind of came out and we were like, oh my God, we have a baby. And I just started like hysterically crying, and there was just so much emotion and connection. And yeah, I think just it became a coping mechanism at a certain point.
Yeah, I think that, like, I remember with us when we had our first loss, our first miscarriage, I should say. First of all, it was one day after my kidney transplant, and I was sitting in the hospital room recuperating, and I also was like, we just got to do this. Let's get started. My doctor's like, are you sure you want to do this so close to your transplant? I was like, no, no, no. They said I'll be fine, like 8 to 12 weeks. I'll be fine. And I was in the hospital like the whole year after my transplant. It was nuts. And in a way, once we had that first miscarriage, I was like, okay, timing is meant to be. Like, you know, I would not have been able to have a baby right now. But I remember that with our second surrogate, when she had when the first embryo transfer also miscarried, I was like, it's fine. We'll just do it again. And I felt like
Yeah.
cold about it, but I was just very matter of fact. Like I
Yeah.
was like, this is our end goal. And you just have to do that to like protect yourself, because how much more emotion can you, give off, because
100%.
it's so, yeah,
It's like a
totally. I would actually say,
protective shell that you kind of build around yourself.
yeah, totally. And in art, it actually, in a way, I'm not saying that my reaction negatively impacted our surrogate, but I actually felt, and I think she sort of admitted it at a certain point, that it was the first time that she had a miscarriage, and we were her third journey. And she like felt disconnected from the whole pregnancy. And that was really hard for me, because she like wouldn't give me updates so willingly. And she was just like, because she was nervous the whole
Right.
time. And so it's like, it's your emotions, it's the surrogate's emotions, it's like so much that goes into
So
this.
much.
Yeah,
So much.
yeah, really,
So many feelings.
totally. Um, what was it like for you though to, I guess, manage your emotions and like your family, like them all saying like good luck? Like, did you update people throughout? Did you try at a certain point like just kind of keep it close to the heart because it was too much to share, or you were very open all the whole time?
Um, I think it varied at points. I've never like kept it from anyone. I think it became exhausting at a certain point, like remembering who to update and tell. And I think at some point I just kind of let myself off the hook on updating everyone in real time. And I was kind of like, well, I'll just update someone when they check in with me. Um, but I knew that a lot of people were invested and, wanting to sort of know what was going on. And, it was something that like I always felt a little bit conflicted about, because in a way it did make it like more not difficult, but like it was just like another job for me to do, to like let people know, hey, the transfer is this day, or hey, by the way, we had another miscarriage. But I did want people to know when things weren't going well, because it was nice to have that support.
Yeah.
Although like at a certain point it was like, I think everyone is sick of sending us like ice cream and flowers, and like it's like enough tragedy.
Right.
And so I think I felt like we were a bit of a pity party, but I was still happy to share our updates.
Yeah. Uh, The approach that I took at a certain point with my family was, actually, please don't ask me for updates. I'll update you when I have an update. Like, I
Yeah.
just needed to not have everybody's
Yes.
opinions and questions. And yeah. Um, so looking back, before you had started your surrogacy journeys, uh, what would be maybe something you wish you had known before, or advice that you would receive that you now give somebody else?
It's a great question. And I think the best advice I could give someone that I kind of learned the hard way throughout, and I'm still learning in many ways, is to just kind of surrender to the situation when you know it's one where you don't have much control. At the end of the day, it's happening in someone else's body. They're seeing a doctor that is not your doctor. They're going to be born in a hospital that you did not choose. You are not going to be treated like the patient. I wrote about that a bunch in my Substack, which is like something that I felt just so blown away by. But it's, you got to just roll with it. And it is so hard to do. And that is like one of the hardest things for me in life, because I'm a control freak and I like to plan and I want to know what I'm having for dinner on a Wednesday in 3 years from now. But, you can't control the outcome and you can't be attached to the outcome, and there will be setbacks. That's kind of what I would tell someone.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like a major like dark cloud, but I kind of look at it as like it's going to make it easier, because if you accept that now, you will not be kind of as brought down to your knees later on in the process, because it will happen, and it kind of does happen across the board. It doesn't matter if it's like a miscarriage or a miscommunication about medication or whatever, like if it's big or small, it's just not going to go the way that you planned or wanted, and knowing that will be helpful.
Totally. And you said something now that now I wanted to follow up on a question, but I blanked on it. Okay, well, I'll ask you a different question, then I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Um, but I guess the next question I'll ask is: so you experienced having two surrogates and your two babies, and then you decided to do what with your experience?
I decided to start a business matching intended parents with surrogates. So I worked with someone that kind of did the same thing, and I was really inspired by her, and I really wanted to find a way to like make this my career. Honestly, I worked in fashion and jewelry marketing for like 15 years, and I liked it and I was pretty good at it. But I never felt like it really like filled me up. And I was always really jealous of people who felt really connected to their work and felt like it was really meaningful. And I honestly, like, I was always sort of like soul searching, and I kind of was like, I think I'm never gonna like find what that thing is for me. And then I went through this, and many people would come to me to ask about surrogacy just because it's not common, it's not spoken about a lot. And I kind of was having these conversations with people all the time, and then it kind of dawned on me like maybe I can actually help people in a professional capacity. And so I kind of started just matching people with agencies I had spoken to, and it sort of has taken off. And I'm really like so fulfilled by it in a way that I never even imagined I could be.
That's amazing.
Thank
You
you.
know, it's funny. So I worked at a high school when we were expecting our first child, and I didn't tell anybody, none of the students, when we were expecting our child, because I was so worried also about the questions. And it's an Orthodox community, and nobody was talking about it,
Yeah.
like you said. Um, and when my son was born, and I sent a video from the hospital, and they showed it to the like at an assembly. It was very sweet. And when I like finally spoke to the students about it when I came back, they're like, yeah, we all knew about surrogacy. Like Kim Kardashian did surrogacy. And I was like, okay. I did not know that was going to be the point of reference, you know? And it's funny because like Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, like and other, you know, stars, if you will, have done it. So in a way, like they've brought it up more. It's popularized by them, which is really
Yeah.
great. And it makes kind of having the conversation a little bit easier with some people. But I think like doing conversations like this is really important because we're giving like the inside scoop, and really raising awareness,
Yes.
because there are a lot of people out there who don't know that it's an option, and they don't know that they can have a family through a surrogate. And I actually worked with a woman who was married for 18 years before she heard about surrogacy, and she had so many losses and so many trials and nothing. And finally, she heard about surrogacy, and she went through the process, and went by her 25th anniversary, because it took quite some
Oh my
time. She
God.
finally had her first child. You know, and it's
Right.
really like, like my heart hurts for her, thinking all those years, you know, if only she had known. Granted, you know, it only became more popular in the last 2 decades or so, but
Yeah.
it's really important to take your experience like you did, and turn it into this service that can help so many people, which is amazing. And I think that, you know, part of Carly and I only met a few weeks ago, and we I think I felt connected pretty quickly. We really kind of speak the same
Absolutely.
language. Yeah. And you know, the reason why I started my support group and network was because I didn't know anybody that had done surrogacy, and I felt so alone. And it's not like, it's like we said before, like it's not just like 9 months and then you go. It's not going to a vending machine, choosing F7, and then your baby comes out, right? Like there's so much nuance, and there's so much emotion, and there's so much
Totally.
money and everything. And like unless someone else has had this experience to kind of help guide you, it's really hard. And what you're doing by helping people match faster is amazing, but also answering questions for people is just so invaluable. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Um,
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm bringing a lot of value in cutting down the match time, and that is like, the majority of sort of what my business model is built around. But the most important thing for me, and I will speak to anyone, free of charge, who's just like starting out or curious about sort of how to approach this, is like I want to educate people and empower them with the information that they need to know that there are more options than just what the doctor may present to you. I think lots of clinics, and they're not doing anything wrong, but they're sort of like, these are the 4 agencies that we like, and you should work with this one lawyer. And no pun intended, but like people have agency over this process and what it looks like for them, and they should retain their own counsel, and they should do their own research on agencies and know that they can work with someone like me or do their own research and make this process work for them. It doesn't have to be so prescriptive. And I think there's so much sort of misinformation in a lot of these. The communities around this are amazing, but there's also a lot of misinformation, and I think just kind of cutting through that and giving people like real facts about how they can proceed is so important, and like I hope I can help do that for more people.
Absolutely. It's amazing. And I see actually from the names that are on here, I think both your surrogates are on here.
Yes,
One of them
they
just
are.
came on later. And I just want to give a shout out to those women because also I think a lot of surrogates do a lot of great PR for the surrogacy process, and
100%.
they share with their friends and inspire other women to do it. And as an intended parent, you know, we wait so long to meet those people who will help us, and you really make dreams come true. So thank you,
100%.
Tori and Crystal, for helping, you know, Carly, and for doing any advocacy that you do on your end.
They are both amazing women who, you know, have definitely like Tori, I know, has helped other surrogates. She went to a transfer with a surrogate that she met sort of through the surrogacy community and was so amazing. And Crystal is super active on social media as well and talks about this really openly. And she was posting every day from the hospital. And they're both so special. And I'm so blessed that they're in my life.
It's great. You know, it was funny. So I have a sister who lives out in California, and we had gone out to visit her. And I don't know if it's like a thing in California or not, whatever, but someone had come to her house to cut her kid's hair. So they were like, you know, oh, give me a haircut. And I saw she was
Not there
pregnant.
yet, but I'll find out.
Okay, yeah. Um, and I had seen her like on another visit, and I was like, oh, that's so nice. She's pregnant. And my sister's like, oh, she's actually a surrogate. I'm like, can I have her number? Like, what's going on here? You know, like you just like get excited to meet
Yeah.
surrogates, and like, you know, it's great. Okay, so I guess just one final question that I
Yeah.
have for you, that your kids are still little, but people always ask me this, is maybe have you given any thought about how you plan on talking about this with your kids? Does it feel way too premature to even think about it? You know, that's something that people often ask me about.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's too premature by any means. It was actually the one question that I asked a lot. Our fertility doctor, who's amazing, she also she used a surrogate. She has a couple kids through surrogacy, but she also was pregnant when her surrogate was pregnant, and so her kids are also exactly like 4 or 5 months apart. She did warn me not to do this, and I hear her in my head sometimes. But I asked her, like, how did you explain this to them? Her kids are a little bit older now. And she said she just kind of would talk to them about it, like at night, putting them to bed, even when they were really little. And so I've kind of started doing that. Not necessarily every night, but sometimes when I'm putting them down for a nap, I just kind of like explain to them like how they got here and what their birth story is. And hopefully it's sticking somewhere. And as they get older, we'll talk about it more. There are a lot of books out there, none that I've loved in particular. I thought about writing one and then I got busy with other things.
Like having two babies, yeah.
Yeah, and then this business that I've started, but I think it's for us personally, like it's important to us that we tell them about it and that they understand it and it's not taboo, and that they will spend time with Tori and Crystal over the course of their life at various points, and it will be normalized. That would be my goal.
Yeah, I just recorded a podcast series for my other daytime work, and one of the people that I interviewed, he shared that, and I hope you don't mind this reference or whatever, but he said it's kind of like the Holocaust. Like you don't know when you first learned about it, but if you grew up in the Jewish community or maybe in the world, whatever, you kind of just, it was always something that you knew happened in history. He's like, so we treat this the same way. Like we're just
Yeah.
always talking about it. And their daughter just turned 2, I think, and they said like at her birthday they were like, we waited so long for you to join our family and be a part of our family, and we waited and waited, and they just like just bring it into conversation and different things like that, and that's really great. Any last words of advice or anything that you want to share, or how can people contact you if they're interested?
Yeah, I mean, advice, kind of just what I said, like letting go, the surrendering piece, kind of knowing that you can't control, I think is the biggest thing that I would share. And I think just rings true in all parts of this, whether you're like just starting IVF or just starting to think about surrogacy or you've had a setback, like I think it applies sort of everywhere. I would love to speak with anyone who is curious about surrogacy, whether they're looking for a surrogate or has just questions about the process. You can find me here on Instagram. My handle is Carly P. Joseph, and my website is carlypjoseph.com, and you can email me from there as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Carly. This
No,
is really fun to
thank
chat
you.
with you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. And thank you to your fan club for coming on and listening. Lots of
Yes,
love.
thank you, everyone.
We are going to have this is recorded. It'll be up on the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby website. It'll be here on Instagram, but it'll also be turned into a podcast, which is really great. So, wow, look, your fan
Oh,
club
wow.
put your website in for you.
Thanks, Matt.
And thank you all so much. And if you know anybody that, needs a little encouragement or help or someone to listen to, you can also send them to our direction at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. That's our handle. And we have support in all different parts of infertility and loss and surrogacy. And we're just here to, help people through this process. So thank you all so much. Have a great
Thanks,
night.
Aliza.
Bye.
Bye.